Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this Audit and Risk Management Committee meeting to order. The clerk has confirmed that quorum is present, and I will begin with the land acknowledgement. We gratefully acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Colleagues, do any of you wish to declare a conflict of interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none. The next item is the approval of the Audit and Risk Management Committee minutes of June 5th and July 15th, 2024. Can I have a motion, please, to move the minutes? Thank you, Commissioner Osborne. All in favor? Okay, Commissioners, I will now commence with a review of the order paper. Number 1, International Association of Public Transport proposed peer review. I'm holding this for a deputation and presentation. Obstacles and opportunities to moving surface transit. We're going to have a presentation from staff. The audit, risk and compliance audit plan status update. Does anyone want to hold this item? Hearing none. Does anyone like to move the report recommendations?
Sorry, I just have a question.
You do have a question, okay. All right, we'll hold it then and we'll deal with it later. Although I did want to congratulate Verige and the Internal Audit staff and whoever else was involved in this. These reports were so much better than the ones we were getting in March. So thank you very much. We've got 2 other items we're going to want to address. We're going to request an update on the outstanding Auditor General recommendations and an update on the status of fair evasion. And I'd like to have the fair evasion matter as a standing item each meeting where we get an update because it's so important to the TTC. All right, that concludes review of the order paper. And thank you for preparing the usual script. I do appreciate it. We are going to begin with item 1, which is always a good place to start. We have a speaker on this item, Colby. Is Colby here? There we are. Great, Colby Bedwar. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Bedwar, all right. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. So this report states that one of the things that a peer review can assess is safety and security, but there isn't really any other mention of that in the rest of this discussing about what this peer review would actually do for the TTC. I think that's a bit of an oversight that this is listed as an option as one of the things that these peer reviews can assess, but staff is not recommending that that would be a core focus of this proposed peer review audit that we're going to have done by some external experts. So I would posit, given that this is such a problem on the TTC right now, and we just had another violent crime yesterday on the system, a customer was stabbed, quite seriously injured on a streetcar on Dundas yesterday afternoon. I would posit that perhaps having some external experts come in to assess the state of safety and security in the TTC would be something that would be of high importance. So I would ask that this committee give some direction to management on ensuring that that would be something that would be looked at, and that some of the experts that would be brought in would have some level of expertise in that specific field, because none of the experts whom are listed in this report have any background in those aspects of transit operations, nothing to do with safety and security. So I think that that's a pretty big oversight, and I would encourage both this committee and the board at large to give some direction to staff to correct that. Thank you.
Do any of my colleagues have questions for the deputant? Colby, why do you think the purpose of this peer review with Board ASTRA was on maintenance? And that, which is something, with the derailment and the hydraulic oil leaks, certainly we need to tune up to be sure that we have an adequate process for maintenance on issues that could lead to service interruptions. So you're suggesting in essence that we should also look for a peer review on safety and security.
Yes.
What particular questions do you think we would be asking international experts to advise on?
Well, I would say that when you have these external reviews or audits come in, there's typically sort of a rubric of all sorts of different things that they would assess any agency on. So you could certainly provide direction on specific things that would be of interest to you. But I can say in the private sector, it's very, very common for private properties, large private properties like buildings and other organizations. They have regular security audits. And so they'll hire a company that specializes in doing that work, and they come in and they already know all the different things that they want to look for. And the client may have, again, particular areas of interest where, hey, we think that we're having an issue with this, so we'd really like you to focus on this and give us feedback. But they're coming in and they already have a good understanding of all of the things. What are the industry standards and best practices that they're checking to see whether you're meeting those standards or not. And APTA 10 years ago did a audit sort of that was really focused on safety and security for the TTC. So now that it's been 10 years, I think it's overdue for something along those lines to happen. And I'd be happy I can email you the APTA audit and can walk you through some of what that audit found if that's of interest for you, so you can get a sort of a comparison for what's been done in the past. So that's the kind of thing that I'd be looking for, is to have some outside experts in transit, public safety in particular, come in and see where the TTC is, benchmarking against peers in transit, see what's being done well, what's not being done well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the suggestion. It doesn't relate directly to the item we have today, which has a specific focus, but I'd love to see the old review, and certainly be inviting staff to tell us, is it time to ask for external review of that? Or if now isn't the time, when do you think is? And let me ask, thank you very much, Colby. Internal audit, have you done an audit? Have you been asked to do an audit of safety and security? Is that on your plan?
We did do a review on the special constable side of things in terms of transit safety. So we've done that before, and those results have been presented. But so outside of that, not in the recent past, but we are also using our kind of risk management lens as well to get into some of those risks of transit safety and security, including what potential actions that management could be taking to get to a certain desired state.
All right. Well, let me encourage you to come back to us at an appropriate time. I'm not telling you when it is, but not forever from now, to tell us whether an update of what was done 10 years ago is recommended. Is it a good use of money? Is it timely? Do we have unanswered questions? So I'd like to have some feedback on it.
Madam Chair, just for some background, we actually did just issue an RFP.
Oh.
Look at an assessment of our safety, security, and wellness programs. So we should have some responses to that soon. So to the Deputy's questions and to yours, that will be happening soon.
Okay, well, great news. So Colby, thank you for raising it. Thank you.
So we're happy to kind of circle back and update to this committee or to just the board in general about the timing of that award.
Sure. Well, maybe I don't know what the timing is. Will you know that by the board meeting?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe you could give us an update then.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you for the question. Any other deputants to this item? Okay, so we're getting a presentation. Oh, is there someone with a question?
Sorry, I
Was
just have
it
a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Josh, thanks for chiming in there and sharing that there's going to be some work done to evaluate some of the safety and wellness. Could you maybe just give us a sneak peek on what the expected scope looks like?
I certainly can. I can't do that right now, but I'm happy to share that, even just the scope with committee members. So I'll make sure to distribute that. It's being led by our Chief Safety Officer, obviously in consultation with other areas. But that work will be starting. There was also an APTA safety audit that they do some audits like that. So it's another option for us to look to APTA to see where we could learn about what other systems are doing in probably a less formal and expensive way. So potentially another tool. So happy to provide that for the members of the committee.
Sure. And then my second question, Chair, if you'll humor me, is just similar to what we did with sanitation protocols during COVID-19. Maybe staff could speak a little bit about how they're relying on their peer agencies to get informal advice on how how to address some of the issues as it relates to safety in the city, just to give us a bit more comfort that we're not just operating in a black box, and we are getting some advisory, if not informally, from our peer agencies.
Great. I appreciate that. And we'll take that away. And just to confirm, the APTA audit's actually happening in October. So
Oh,
we've got two
okay.
different pieces of work coming. So to Commissioner Jagdeo, we'll make sure that that's incorporated.
That's excellent news. Thank you. Glad to
Thank
hear it. Okay, I understand we're getting a presentation now on the, from who, I'm not exactly sure, from UITP.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
Chris?
I'll just do the introductions, Chair.
Okay.
Again, we have Jaspal and Oslam here from UITP, who, they did give a wholesome, what do you call it, presentation to staff previously on this. And again, that resulted in a quotation and proposal from UITP. Again, Jaspal will give us a shortened version of that presentation just now. So I'll hand it over to Jaspal.
Yeah, thank you, Gary, and thank you, Madam Chair. I hope everybody can hear me well. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm just trying to share my screen.
We can see your screen. If you can get it onto full screen, it'll
Okay.
be a little
Is
bit
it-
easier.
Is it okay now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me try to share again. Sorry, I have these multiple screens, so that's why it's creating some problem. Okay, now I think I can see that.
If you go
Okay.
under slideshow, there you go.
Yes, so you must be able to see now. So
Yes, thank you.
firstly, thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to present. I quickly share a little bit about UITP. So we are International Association of Public Transport. So I generally tell people is we're like a global version of APTA, having members in 100 countries around the world, and TTC is one of the proud member, and we're working very closely on different topic. So today, when we had a discussion with the TTC staff member, they reach out and they talk about, like you mentioned, some of the maintenance issue we are facing right now with the subway and streetcar. So idea was how we can review some of the practices follow for subway and the streetcar. So I'll quickly cover about what is the project understanding we have and how UITP do the peer review process. We generally prefer to have a wider consultation with different agencies. And then I would also share a little bit about the project timeline, how much time it will take, and how we can go about that. Regarding the project overview, we fully understand that TTC has published this asset management plan this year, and idea is that how the state of good repair can be achieved and how the maintenance and the reliability of the asset can be increased. So when we discussed with the staff, we started with a very wider idea, but then we narrowed down, and currently the scope of the project is to review the subway and the streetcar maintenance processes, procedure, and record to identify the area of improvement and help TTC to follow some of the industry best practices. And one thing I want like to highlight is the challenge TTC is facing right now. It's not unique. We have seen agencies around the world go through that path, and there are some hiccups happen during this process. And sometimes it's important to learn from the peers how those disruption can be improved. So in terms of a deliverable, we are focusing on producing a standard reporting and executive summary of our visit and the study we will be doing. And idea is also to identify some of the best practices and the peer experience which TTC can follow. So sometimes it's not that you're doing anything wrong, but probably tweaking a process a little bit and focusing on some area can produce better result.
Okay, well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, if you have any question, happy to.
I'm sorry, please finish.
Okay, so in terms of organization, how we do, so generally we do peer review in three ways. We can either do completely online. We did in the past with TTC on CBTC. That was an online peer review we did during the COVID period. Generally, we prefer on-site, and now we are trying to do more hybrid. So idea will be there will be a site mission. So we will invite experts team to visit on ground and have consultation with the staff member and understand what practices they are following right now. An idea is not to pinpoint or highlight something there, but to more understand what is happening on the ground. And after they understand more what is happening on the ground, we try to go back and do more consultation internally and produce a report based on the finding we have. Currently, we are looking to involve experts mainly from Europe and Asia Pacific. Like I mentioned, we had some discussion with some other members, and they had similar issues in the past, but now they have achieved one of the best results. So, idea is to involve some of the expert who went through these phase and has expertise in this area. In terms of the process we follow, so I just want to share it's like a 5-step process. So generally, after the finalization of the contract, we will share the list of experts who will involve in the project, and we sign NDA with these experts, so they cannot share any information outside or cannot use that information for any other purposes. And the report is shared with the team. And then after finalization of the team, we start preparing work for the peer review, and we have a kickoff meeting. And then we also need to establish a peer review team from the TTC side, the people who will be involved in that process. The expert will also require some document before visiting the site. They want to make sure they have all the information available and review those information. And if they have any additional question, they come back. And then we kind of plan online peer review in a way. We do consultation sessions. We try to organize some presentation and all, so that we don't waste too much of time on site. So these online consultation help to understand each other better. After that, we conduct this site mission, and the idea for site mission is that those experts come on the ground and they see. And sometimes it also help to point out, is there any variation between what the procedure and process say and what is happening on the ground. So sometimes we have those blind spots. So the on-site peer review will help to understand those blind spots and help to understand if something can be tweaked and done. And then after completing the on-site mission, we do this report preparation where we highlight what we saw, what we observe, and what are the area of improvement, and what can be some best practices followed by other agencies. So idea is not to just say, okay, everything is not working, but the what we want to achieve after this peer review is how things can be improved. In terms of timeline, I just want to share it can take between 18 to 24 weeks. Again, because there are multiple steps involved, so we need to do some online research, some desktop review, and then there will be some online meeting to do that, and then there will be a site mission where we will be visiting, and then we will be submitting a final report. The other thing I want to highlight is generally for maintenance practices, it's important not to have a review or consultation with the management level or senior level, but also to have at the union level. So we would prefer to have some consultation with a couple of union which I'm aware of, one and some other you may suggest also, which is important, because sometimes it's important the people who are working on the ground, they share the things which can help, and sometimes we can also share what the learning from outside. So I know ATU and there are a couple of other, but we want to involve everybody in that process, not just the senior management, so that we have a wider range of view. So this is kind of a brief overview from our side. We already submitted a detailed proposal to Gary and Sam, and today we thought just to give a brief abstract about how does this peer review will look like.
Okay, Commissioner Jagdeo.
Jaspal and the UITP, thanks so much for sharing this. Chair, this is mostly a question to you, actually. I know we were having some correspondence, and you mentioned that there was an adjusted or more specific scope of work that was in works.
That's right. That's right.
Maybe I didn't receive any emails, but maybe you could share what that looks like now.
Sure. Could you go back to the slide on scope, because it is enormously improved? Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the new scope. The first draft that was circulated was way too vague, and as we all know, if you don't ask the right question, you don't get a useful answer. So, so this is the revised scope that was prepared, and I apologize, Commissioner Jagdeo, I thought I had sent this to everyone, but it's possible I missed it.
Okay.
If you didn't get it, you heard my apologies, but yes, this is the revised scope, which is a much better match to what the board had asked for. Do you have any questions or concerns about the revised scope?
No, this is great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other commissioners, do you have any questions for staff or for the presenter? Sorry, I should start with, anybody have any questions for the presenter? Go ahead. You have to press the button.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that the information that you gather during this project will be kept confidential, but will it be used in any way for future work for other transit organizations that you will be working on? But so the information will be used, but what you're saying, I just wanted to confirm, what you're saying is that any identifiable information will be scrubbed?
No, so thank you for raising this point. Like I mentioned, we have a very strict policy for confidentiality for these data, because some of these data can be sensitive for the organization. And so generally UITP policy, we don't share these information cross project. So that's why when we involve the experts, we clearly tell them these conditions, and also the expert, the information they share in confidence. So it's not that the information shared by the experts also can be used. But idea is to keep this data confidential. At the same time, what we see, some of the agencies actually want to make it public, and they want to share it in the open format. And we have no objection with that, as long as some of the information, if we felt, is confidential. But we work with the agency. If they want to make it public and share, we are happy to do that. But from our side, we keep it confidential, and we don't use for cross project.
Any other questions from commissioners for the presenter? Okay, I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if these should go to the presenter or to staff, whoever is appropriate can answer. First of all, I do want to say thank you very much for revising the scope. This is enormously improved from the draft we got last week. Very glad to hear also that you've agreed to include union consultation as I requested. Appreciate that very much. The scope here, subway and streetcar, that includes vehicles and the rails and the overhead, everything that the streetcar and subway need to run. Is that correct? Somebody?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And why, briefly, did you pick subway and streetcar and not bus?
Because that was the request from the chair of the board, because we tend to be having more issues, particularly on streetcar and subway compared to the buses at this point in time. And that was a direct motion that came out of the enterprise asset management plan we presented on April the 11th. The motion was raised by the chair specifically for streetcar and subway.
Right. Do you agree that it's appropriate to focus these resources on streetcar and subway, or do we have any major maintenance concerns about bus?
I don't know if Fort or Rich are actually on here at this point in time.
Rich is here.
Rich could
Oh,
probably...
and Fort. They're both here.
Yeah, Rich could probably answer that question better than I can, Chair.
Okay, Rich.
Yeah. So on the bus side, I think things are well in order. We, just for your information, we are audited by the Ministry of Transportation every 6 months as part of our licensing requirements. So we do get third-party audits every so often. That includes audit of the vehicle and the licensings of the mechanics that work on the vehicle. So that's a little bit of assurance for you. Not adverse to having another audit. As you know, more audits just means more eyes on it. So we're always open to any other audits that you may request.
No, I understand that, and you folks are very cooperative. Well, when we spend our money, we want to spend it on problems. So I guess my question is, do you feel an urgent need for a third-party review of bus maintenance, or is bus maintenance in fairly good shape?
they're in fairly good shape. I think the first priority is probably the rail side.
Okay,
Not saying that we have a major problem there either, but I would think it's better money spent on the rail side.
okay, that's good. So those are my questions. Anybody want to speak to this matter? Any, Commissioner Jago?
I'll just speak very quickly. Look, I think the UITP does fantastic work. I've interacted with them in the past. I believe that it's important that we have our external peers do analysis and research and provide us recommendations on where we're going, what we're doing. And this is a critical issue for the city of Toronto. And if we can get some advisory based on the expert panel, then I think we should certainly welcome it. So I'm fully in favor of any peer review that gets us to a better position. So thank you, UITP, for putting this together and for adjusting the scope so that we are a bit more specific, because if we can measure it, we can manage it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Commissioner Osborne, for whatever reason, I can't see you on my screen. Do you have any questions or, sorry, do you want to speak to this matter?
Just to add that I agree, I really welcome this audit, and I find that when we get our situations, whatever they are, problems, not problems, put into context with benchmarking against other agencies, we're often looking at this stuff in a vacuum. I think it's very helpful to bring eyes onto these issues that have looked at similar type of transit agencies. So look very forward to seeing your work.
Excellent. Commissioner Kim?
Just a question regarding the evaluation. When you do the evaluation of the TTC's program and processes, at the end, do you assign a grade? Like a ranking? Because I know that in other industries they do, and then it almost becomes a point of honor.
Thank you, Commissioner Kim, for raising this point. Generally, we don't do, like, idea for these review are more to understand the practices followed by the agencies and what can be improved and all. Because generally, if you do grading, then you have to have multiple agencies doing the same review at the same time and same challenges. So we don't do, but we do issue a certificate in some cases if the agencies ask, is it they are doing good or they are doing okay, or they can improve certain area, but we don't assign a grade to remain neutral. And also, like I mentioned, most of these reports remain confidential, so sometimes agencies don't prefer to talk about. It's only for internal reference, so we avoid doing those kind of a grading and ranking.
All right. Did you want to speak to the matter? All right. So I just wanted to thank everyone for this presentation and for getting on with this. I know that there had been some conversation about whether this meeting was necessary. I do think it is necessary to get on with this external review. There's been a lot of public concern, especially after the 8th hydraulic oil spill earlier this year, as to whether we knew what we were doing. And anything we can do to reduce service disruptions is valuable and essential. So I am going to recommend that the Audit and Risk Management Committee endorse the UITP online on-site proposal of 70,000 euros plus travel and accommodation cost to carry out a peer review on the TTC subway and streetcar assets and maintenance programs. Sorry, that doesn't match exactly what we saw on the screen. But is this, oh, this is a recommendation. Okay, fine. Endorse UITP online on-site proposal of 70,000 euros plus travel and accommodation to carry out peer review on TTC subway and streetcar assets and maintenance programs and to report back to this committee. All those in favor? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And we really, really, really look forward to this being useful and adding some value and helping us do an even better job. All the staff here want to do a really good job, and I hope you can give us some useful tips and tools.
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. Like I said, we are proudly working with TTC, and TTC is a proud member, and we are looking how we can help and improve the transit system.
Okay, thank you. That concludes item 1. Item 2 is a presentation on obstacles and opportunities for moving surface transit. Do we have any deputations on this? No deputations, okay. So Josh Cole is going to open with some remarks, and I hope each of you had a chance to review the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, everyone, for being here. This is a timely conversation. We're glad you've brought it to this committee. For those of you that have met me, I'm Josh Cole, the Chief Strategy and Customer Experience Officer of the TTC. With me today is Roger Brown, who's the Director of Traffic Management at the City of Toronto. I hope I got that right. And Eric Chu on our TTC team, who's the Head of Project Development and Planning of the TTC. And so what we are hoping to do today is run through what we've called obstacles and opportunities to moving surface transit. Really want to highlight some of the tools we have at our disposal, some of the challenges that these tools hopefully will address, and then looking a bit forward at some of our successes and what we can do more of to move forward. So that is the plan. And if Chrisanne, you might. So just to reinforce, this is a serious and significant priority for the TTC. As many of you know, we have a new corporate plan. And one of the key elements of the corporate plan is to attract and retain riders and build customer loyalty. And the underpinnings of this is to focus on the basics. So service reliability and speed, and advancing implementation of measures to prioritize surface transit. So clearly a critical thing that we're going to drive towards and make sure that we're tracking and monitoring this year. For a way of context, over the last couple of years, congestion adds about $30 million for operating costs. So these are costs solely borne by the TTC in our operating budgets. So it's real, it's significant, not to mention the experience of our customers as they try and travel through the city. So an important conversation, one that we're seized with, and one that I think it's important to note that this can only be achieved in partnership with lots of stakeholders and partners. And one of the key partners is obviously the City of Toronto. So I want to just maybe hand the next slide to Roger just to highlight some of what they're doing in terms of their approach on congestion management.
And Roger, maybe you could start by introducing yourself and who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Brown. I'm the Director for Traffic Management with the City of Toronto, and thanks again, Josh, for the introduction. I wanted to speak specifically just to the fact that when we presented the congestion management plan to City Council, this is the renewed plan in October of last year, there were 4 key pillars to the plan, and I cannot emphasize enough how critical the second pillar is with respect to increased support for transit, whether it's using our traffic agents to support transit, whether it's using transit signal priority technologies, the queue jump lanes. There's a number of different projects, initiatives that Transportation Services has been working very closely with TTC on over the years, and really doing everything we can to try and accelerate those efforts. Because I know oftentimes you hear the expression, there's no silver bullet to solving congestion. Well, the closest thing I would argue, it would certainly be with respect to supporting transit and supporting other modes of people getting in and around the city as reliably and safely as possible. And there are a number of ways, particularly with technology and with traffic agents, to basically facilitate that, where we can, not just in terms of the permanent solution of moving transit more effectively and efficiently around the city, but also myself and the teams at TTC have been working very closely with respect to whenever there's any sort of disruptions in service to either subway or streetcar tracks, where there's a need to divert to street operations. And so like, the Spadina closures or subway closures, what things can we do to basically support the on-street, surface street project in terms of the buses on the road, to ensure that during those short-term disruptions, likewise, we're able to maintain a high degree of reliability for transit throughout the city. So on that note, I'll turn it back over to you, Josh. But yeah, we'll go through in a lot more detail some of the initiatives we've been jointly working together on.
Thanks very much for that, Roger. And so, yeah, it's definitely working with the city, but there are things that the TTC kind of, I would say, has within our own toolbox and things we do day to day. So obviously, we're always adjusting schedules to kind of react to that congestion and that traffic and those things that Roger mentioned. Nothing beats having human beings out on stations and at the street to actually manage this. And I think that's proven in a lot of instances to improve flow and the speed of transit. Obviously, having a bus fleet that we can use in direct to fill gaps, to address closures, unplanned diversions is something we're doing with almost constant regularity. Working to make sure that our employees are getting the proper training to make sure that they're getting out on the right time and not leaving too early or too late. And then of course, our buses and streetcars at some point get to a station or a terminal. So to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place there for loops, for stations, to make sure that we're not causing any unintended queuing issues that is slowing the trip and journey for people. Do the next slide. So then in terms of the tools in our toolbox that we share with the city, because obviously the city regulates and owns the road, so to speak, there are a significant number of tools or interventions that we use and are seeing success with and like to do more of. So the first would be a transit signal, and we're going to go through all of these just to give everyone a primer on them. Transit signal priorities, queue jump lanes, bus priority lanes, and then we've got a kind of a basket of regulatory changes. This is the fun stuff like removing, or we'll call it transforming or modernizing parking, so that maybe transit vehicles can flow more smoothly through corridors. So we'll get into some of what those detail in a second. But before that, I want to speak to kind of what does success look like and what are some of the keys to success? And part of this too recognizes and reinforces maybe some of our barriers and where we might stub our toe at times. And the first one would be the collaboration level between the city and the TTC. That is critical. We need to have that kind of hand-in-glove approach to make sure that technology, communication, collaboration is happening. And I'd say from my early days at the TTC, I probably met with the City of Toronto more on this than any other topic. So it is happening. So I think some good news there and always room for improvement. The other key to success is really fundamentally council approval, and in two ways: city council for budgets, for policy direction, but we recognize the influence that local councillors and their buy-in or small a approval can play in getting some of these initiatives implemented. And so when we see that in place, we really kind of immediately see success. Funding always will be on a list like this. And, we've called it sustainable funding because we actually believe that this is a forever endeavor and that we want to roll this out in a really measured, even way. And so there's always a need for staff, which is operating funding and capital funding, to intervene and implement some of these really successful tools. And the last item we would cite for success is having community and customer support. And so on the community side, we recognize that it's difficult, that councillors in the city wear many hats, and there's the challenge of dealing with BIAs and businesses and other interests that have different priorities. So building awareness, building support there, super critical. And with our customers too, I think we collectively agree that we can do a better job of telling the story of why these transit priority measures are a great benefit to customers. And then hopefully we have a series of or hundreds of ambassadors kind of telling this story. And it's not just coming from the city or the TTC. So maybe the next slide. So with that in mind, we have had some recent successes. Some took a long time, some done quite quickly. And so we often point to the King Street Transit Priority Corridor. It's a few years ago now, but I think lots of lessons learned there and things that we can adapt and adopt and make sure that we're employing in other places. And more recently, the Spadina busway, and maybe came about in a very different way than King Street, but the outcomes are very tangible. Travel times on buses have decreased dramatically. And what we've also seen is that there has not been a tangible increase in people in vehicles who are trying to drive that southern part of Spadina, getting onto the Gardiner and the Lakeshore. And so a real success story there. And I think if we look back at those keys to success, both of these have all of those. So I think it proves that if we work together, we have those things lined up, then we can see more of this done. So with that said, and we're trying to move quickly because I know there's going to be lots of questions and we want to make this a discussion as much as possible. I'm going to ask Eric Chu just to go through some of these transit priority measures, just so we're clear on our language, kind of and how these could be impactful and implemented if this is the desire of the board and the city council.
I'm just going to ask, as you go through it, Eric, one of the things we didn't get is a list of priority locations. So I know what you're telling is what you're doing in places, but no one's telling us where you need it most.
So we have that.
But we don't,
So we're happy to give that to you, but in some cases there are hundreds.
right?
So like
But
transit signal
a
priority.
prioritized
Yep.
list, if you're looking for council or commissioner support, and you don't tell us what help you need and where you need it, we can't help you. So
We
please,
are-
as you go through this, make sure you're also addressing what are you doing to use data to identify the places where intervention is most needed and most effective. That's, I didn't see in the presentation, and I'm hoping to hear as you talk through it.
And if I could just interject quickly, we would be happy if this committee were to ask us that question and for that list, and we have that for you.
Consider it asked.
Okay, so I'll go through in more detail some of the key tools in our toolbox that we use with the city, starting with transit signal priority. And so if you don't know, transit signal priority is a system that allows us to modify the traffic signals that provide extended time at the traffic lights so that transit vehicles, whether it's a bus or a streetcar, can make it past the intersection before it goes to red. And as part of the city's congestion management plan, we've actually implemented a record pace of TSP activations since 2022. And now we're doing maybe about 50 locations every year. The map on the right will show all the locations where we have TSP today. And then I would say that the ones that are shown in orange, those are our priorities. Those are the locations where we know we have difficulty with vehicles making, say, a left turn, or
Can you
we're
make
held up
that
by the
bigger
light.
so we can see these orange locations? Okay,
Well, so we have this in a table format. We
Okay.
can supplement that to you afterwards,
all
Chair.
right. And what are your metrics for selecting these and prioritizing these locations?
It's tied to where we know we have delays. So compared to what the scheduled travel time should be and what we observe the actual travel times to be, we know that the difference is delay. It's congestion. And
So-
so knowing where we can adjust the lights to help maybe the buses or the streetcars move quicker, that's how we choose these locations.
So is it strictly by length of delay?
Yes, it's the longer the travel time for customers, it's the more we know we ought to do something to help improve their travel times.
Okay, so is this something we can make public to say to people, we know that these locations are having unnecessary
Yeah.
delays and this is our priority list for getting to them? And we
Yeah.
should tell people what we're doing.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay.
And so what I just described with TSP, that's done using our legacy system right now where it's hardware-based. And so hardware-based means we have
Means it breaks
transponders.
down.
They could. We have transponders that are on board the vehicles, whether it's a bus or a streetcar, and that sends a signal to an in-ground loop that's connected to the signal cabinet at intersections that say, a transit vehicle is approaching, please do something to adjust the lights so that transit can move past. And so that's the legacy setup. The future that we're moving towards is ATSP, which is Advanced Transit Signal Priority. And that uses GPS and cellular to make that same request. It takes away the hardware component and uses GPS and cellular to do it. And without the hardware components, the hope is that we can implement and roll out more TSP more quickly at more intersections. And so we are in the early phases of this project. We expect to do some initial testing with the city early next year on ATSP.
What does initial testing mean?
It's to test the accuracy of the vehicle making the call because transit signal priority is very contingent on the location of the vehicle, where it is in relation to where the intersection is and where the traffic lights are. Having a high degree and consistency of location reading is important in order for the whole system to work.
Do you need board approval to implement this? Or you're just going ahead as fast as?
We're yeah, and
Just
working
going
through
ahead
it right now. So we are moving ahead.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I ask a question before we move on?
Please.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You've said that we've done 50 of these transit signal priority to date, and I'm wondering if you have any results on differences in travel times.
Good question.
We do. So recently, as part of the track rehabilitation work on St. Clair, we went out and inspected all the TSB infrastructure on that corridor and fixed a bunch of it. And through that exercise, we collected before data and after data to see what benefits we get by reactivating and fixing the TSB on a corridor like St. Clair. And the results have been good. Anecdotally, I think from a few people that I know that ride the corridor frequently, they say that they've noticed an improvement on St. Clair since the TSB activations have been turned back on.
Are you collecting data? You can give us actual data?
Yes, and so that's anecdotal, and then we do have the empirical data that we can provide as a supplementary item.
And that's
Sorry.
for the streetcar, is it? The St. Clair streetcar?
That example was specific to the St. Clair streetcar.
Okay. And I'm assuming you've got a bus routes where this has happened as well?
Yes, so we have TSP along, say, the Jane corridor, the Dufferin corridor, along where we've implemented the Line 3 bus replacement service in Scarborough.
Okay, I would love to see that that data, because I am slightly skeptical about the amount we're going to be able to impact this if you've got vehicles that are stuck in traffic. They've got to get to the light to get through, and I'm sure it will help. But I'm very interested in the magnitude of the improvements that we can see on this. So if you have that, it would be much appreciated.
Yeah, and it's a fair point. Not all these are created equal in terms of what their impact is. And so I think one of the things that we're happy to follow up with is kind of like the quantity of impact per intervention or tool, because they're not all equal in a really busy, congested city. And so I think that's something we can overlay.
Right. Another question that I would have, especially in light of the St. Clair experience, is you've got lots of pretty blue dots on there. How many of them are working? We know that most of the St. Clair ones weren't, and they were still on the map. So what assurance do you have? Like, what percentage of these are actually work?
Yeah, I think fair point, and we'll have that. We can provide that for you too. I think one of the things we have to recognize with transit signal priority, we are in the midst of a system, fair to say, a system overhaul. And so priority will go to areas where, as Eric mentioned, where congestion is, or travel time is most impacted by congestion. And there will have to be work done as those are put in eventually to circle back to the old legacy infrastructure to be replacing it. So as in terms of priority, there are some that are working okay. I wouldn't say that they are, leading edge or ideal, but we're not going to replace those first. We're going to get new technology at the intersections where we have challenges now. And then we will have to, and why I say this is going to be a bit of a forever endeavor, is go back to kind of replace some of that legacy infrastructure.
But that again illustrates that we need good, reliable data.
Yep,
Like a map
agreed.
with lots of dots of things where we have no idea whether they work or not, and no idea whether they have much impact or not, isn't very helpful.
Yeah, so we can provide that data as where we're seeing the impact as in an empirical number of where intersection flow is improving. We'll have to just talk to you, Madam Chair, to figure out if you want that on every one of these dots or not. And so we can figure out what that looks like to make sure it's useful.
We do have that. We, as part of our work program, we do know locations that are not working as expected and the ones that are, and the majority of them are working as expected. And it's part of our regular program to.
Some stats would be helpful. We don't know whether 50% of these are failed, 5% of them are failed, 1% of them are failed. All we know is that when you redid St. Clair, you told us that most of them were failed. So if we extrapolate from that, we're not getting much bang for the buck. So we need you to help us understand how are you prioritizing locations?
Yep.
What is actually working and what's the impact?
Yep.
And what do you plan to do about it? And where?
Correct.
Thank you.
The next tool are queue jump lanes. So queue jump lanes are long-term lanes that allow transit to basically move to the front of the queue and bypass the queue of cars that are at the intersection. And so typically how we do this is we take a right turn lane, and if applicable, we would paint it red. and then allow buses to travel through it with the buses accepted tab that you might have seen at intersections. And then we combine this with a far side bus bay and a bus stop if there's the space for it. And to date, we've built about 11 of these projects around the city. We have 22 more that are in the works, about 8 of which are fully funded. And the ones that we have built this year include Dufferin and Lawrence, and ones that we hope to accomplish by the end of the year are at St. Clair and Midland. There's 2 of them, 1 in each direction. And the current work program prioritizes Wilson and Faywood for next year, along with Steeles and Highway 404.
Okay, how are you enforcing that only buses are in these lanes?
So it's a combination of, obviously there's signage on site. No, I know. And then the other thing that we've actually been, it's a timely question because we're talking about, obviously there needs to be more education for drivers. What we've heard back from, in some instances, that people actually don't even know what these are, whether it be a passenger who's boarding a bus or a driver who might be kind of avoiding or driving in it. The ideal, what we've learned on Spadina, would be actually to have traffic enforcement there. That is a more challenging staffing and resourcing question, but that's what one of the successes was realized on Spadina. They work quite well. So what we're trying to do right now is improve education levels, both with counselors, local communities, et cetera, improve signage on site, and so that it's clear to those who are using them, whether you're boarding a bus or driving in a car. The question of enforcement on site, I think, is difficult. Maybe if we got to a world where we could use cameras, like we've seen in other jurisdictions, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I was going to make the comment that within the congestion management plan, we're looking at the possibility of automated enforcement of dedicated bus lanes. And along those lines, working in partnership with Toronto Police, Toronto Parking Enforcement, particularly, they are in the final strokes of their RFP for a new parking enforcement system, which within that RFP, they're going to be looking at automated enforcement dash cams. And through our collaboration discussions, there's even been suggestions about the possibility of having a dash cam enforcement system that could be installed on the buses. And again, we've heard, as part of that project, we've investigated what other jurisdictions have done. New York has been doing this with a tremendous amount of success to date, where they've had these dash cam enforcements put on the buses. And essentially what we've kind of heard from them is the idea that as soon as someone sees a bus coming, they veer away from the lane. So it really does hit the desired effect of the buses always having a clear path, whether or not people are, typically using them or not. Knowing that that enforcement is there has been serving to the benefit of the system.
Yeah, the good news is there are technological solutions there, and they exist now. There are some regulatory and administrative hurdles around them. And I think, Madam Chair, we've discussed that in other instances with enforcement around using cameras for some of this. But we're talking to, let's call them, solutions and solution providers with regularity. And we think that there could be some interesting pilots done around how you could get more meaningful enforcement without having to staff them with humans on the ground.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Please go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know where my hand up button is on this thing. We have in numerous locations around the city speeding cameras that are up, and they tell people we have a speeding camera. So there's both an education and an enforcement operation happening at the same time. And this would seem to me to be an ideal way to, if people don't fully understand, although it's pretty hard to miss, frankly, the red paint, but let's say they don't, in fairness, we can put a sign up that says this is being automatically enforced and this lane is reserved strictly for buses. It would seem to me to be very effective. I don't know about efficient. I hope it is from a cost point of view, way to enforce this, because, it's like the streetcar. They're supposed to have dedicated right-of-ways, but someone pulls in front of them. It just negates the benefit of the access, the sole access that we have.
Right. Well, yes, sorry, go ahead. Roger?
I think we just, I'm kind of putting our legal counsel on the spot, but I know there are some issues with around enforcement and with cameras and uses like this, because we are looking at in quite a few instances putting on streetcars for people who are passing open doors of streetcars, other issues like that. So we definitely think there's an opportunity here and we're looking at it, but some of the administrative and regulatory issues have to be overcome.
Yeah, so I think as Josh said, the biggest issue is that it requires regulatory approval. And so those signs that are posted for the automatic speed enforcement are all because the regulation requires the signage. It also provides the approval for the ASE equipment, same as red light. The board previously requested regulatory change for streetcar illegal passing. The province did provide that regulation so that the tickets become valid tickets that you can then enforce in the system. So all that just requires regulation and changes to the Highway Traffic Act.
Right, but we haven't asked
You
the
haven't-
province for this because you haven't asked us to make that request. So when are you going to bring us a proposal with a request for those changes?
Go ahead.
Yeah, some of those changes are actually being requested through the congestion management plan. That's actually going to council in a few weeks. Well, it's going to IEC and then council. So one of the key legal changes to the Highway Traffic Act that we have identified beforehand is the whole concept of charging the
Owner of the vehicle.
Exactly. So that's one of the sort of framework changes that needs to happen at the provincial level through the Highway Traffic Act. And then likewise, we need to change the local bylaws to match. But
Okay, well, the bylaws are easy.
Yeah.
Comparatively. Do we have a clear, in the congestion management plan that's coming to IEC September 27th, do we have a clear, explicit request to the province of exactly what we need?
that is the plan. Yeah.
So the thing I'll add to that is we'll work with our city colleagues to make sure that this is incorporated into that. I know there was some recent news about the province's unwillingness to look at these things for traffic enforcement, but I still think we want to make sure our transit-specific or queue jump lane ask is part of what you see at council.
Right. Now, also, have you considered putting the cameras in, in the same way the city did for speed cameras at the beginning? Even if you can't issue tickets, being able to gather the information and send letters to the owner to say, your vehicle is putting people's lives at risk.
I think where the first opportunity is and with cameras and the technology exists and is even just to know what the depth of the issue is. So right now we would have to do kind of a very analog way of discovering like, is the queue jump lane being observed or not? So there's a starting point there where we could get excellent baseline data really quickly.
Using cameras.
Using cameras.
Are you going to propose that to us?
Again, yeah, this is forthcoming in the congestion management plan.
Including cameras on buses?
These would not be on buses. These
not on
would be
buses.
mounted
These are
on
the
like
fixed.
a fixed on a post that still could capture a queue jump lane and what the activity would be like in it.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. I mean, fundamentally, if you need city support, if TTC needs city support to make these queue lines, having queue jump lanes that aren't enforced and don't work doesn't help us. So we need you to tell us if you need help.
Yeah, and we will be doing that. Some of that will come through that congestion management plan because many of these things are city council approval items. And so we'll definitely want to make sure they will be in that.
Okay. Do you know now how well these queue jump lanes are working? Do you have data?
Yes. Gosh, what's an example of one? When we implemented Steels and Don Mills a few years ago, the travel time per trip that was saved was up to 5 minutes. And so it's every bus that comes every 5 minutes, saving 5 minutes. And we know from the implementation of queue jump lanes at the 10 other locations beyond Steels and Don Mills, we observed similar kind of levels of benefits for buses.
And do those endure?
Yes, the good thing about queue jump lanes is you kind of do them once and they're there because
Unless they're full of cars.
So from the things that we observe from operational feedback is that they're generally well observed. Because the way that queue jump lanes are set up is that you could have a private auto that's in that right turn lane, but then when they get to the right turn lane, there's no more road in front of them. There's no receiving lane for them to move into. And so generally, because of that arrangement, queue jump lanes compliance of them are higher than other priority measures.
Okay.
Can I ask if you have that data that we could get? I don't know if you have like a sort of a fulsome queue jump lane by queue jump lane improvement. I'm assuming you do actually, because you will have the travel time data. But anyway, if I'd love to see what you have in an aggregated form then we can figure out, are these working? Where are they working? If they're not working, where aren't they working? And just see if we, in certain cases, we want to make sure it's worth doing. And if we are having indications that it isn't worth doing, what do we need to do to fix it?
Fair point. So will you see what you can give us
Yep.
at the next meeting? Anybody, before you go on, anybody else have more questions on the queue jump lanes? Okay, I have one other question. What are you doing to avoid conflicts between cyclists and buses?
So the new format for us implementing queue jump lanes, the new standard that we're working with the city on, is to have the queue jump lanes be painted red where applicable. And so the little diagram on this slide shows the bottom right corner where we have that road marking. And then with that road marking, we indicate that this lane is intended for bus and bike. And so similar to how the standard of putting in the Spadina bus lane between Lakeshore and Richmond was that buses will run in that lane with bikes. And from just observing how the Spadina lanes have worked, is that it's created a better environment for bikes than running in mixed traffic with private autos.
Running in mixed traffic is always awful. Okay, any other questions on this slide? Okay, next slide, please.
All right, and then we get into bus priority lanes and Rapid-TO. So we're all familiar with what Rapid-TO is. Rapid-TO is a program that delivers at a corridor level a whole suite of transit priority measures, but mainly centered around bus priority lanes. And more examples of bus priority lanes in the city include the ones that were recently delivered as part of the Line 3 bus replacement project on Midland, Kennedy, Ellesmere, and Eglinton. And then the targeted solution that we implemented on Spadina. And for any bus priority lanes or for the Rapid-TO project to move forward, having council support is absolutely critical. And with council support, hopefully we will implement Jane Rapid-TO next year, along with Dufferin and Bathurst, which need to be in place before the World Cup in 2026.
And getting council approval mostly depends on you giving us really good evidence as to what the impacts will be and who benefits.
So I think we have really compelling evidence on whether you want to call them bus priority lanes or Rapid-TO, and the verdict is largely out that it improves the service dramatically in terms of frequency, reliability, and speed. But yes, we do need that council approval, so we're happy to help make that case stronger in any way we can. But at the end of the day, like an example like Jane, that is not approved by council. So the data is compelling. We've done years of community outreach and workshops and presenting of data, but at a certain point, we need to kind of get that finally across the line. So we're happy to kind of work with local councillors, council as a whole, to make sure that we get these improvements put in. The other thing I would say is one of the good things is with the World Cup coming, Bathurst and Dufferin may have a bit more of a time-bound timeline around them that may create some of that urgency that we'd love to see.
And then another treatment that we have for improving surface priority is looking at opportunities to add red paint marking at strategic locations to enhance awareness and compliance with transit facilities. And so whether that's at station driveways or queue jump lanes, bus priority lanes, or streetcar right-of-ways, we've identified right now about 50 initial locations that we're going to go out and paint red next year.
You see 50? Yeah, I
50,
see.
yes. And 50 is what we're targeting to do next year, what we've allocated funding for. And this map shows all the other locations in the city where we think some kind of red paint treatment would make sense. And that includes the Rapid-TO corridors that are currently being worked on.
Anyone have questions on the, before you go on, any of my colleagues have questions on this slide? Go ahead.
So when you're targeting or identifying areas where you're going to have priority bus lanes, I assume, because I was kind of confused when you mentioned Jane, because my recollection is Jane is a single lane in one direction, and then there's a lane for parked cars. So how would you have a dedicated bus lane?
Certain parts of Jane are more constrained than others. So the segment that's being looked at right now for Rapid TO is north of Eglinton to Steeles, where there's generally at least a 4-lane cross section in both both ways. And when we go to council later, I think it's at the end of the year, we'll have a presentation about what our recommendation is for where we want to take away a lane and have it enhanced for bus priority.
Okay, so generally your targets are going to be the larger streets.
And the ones with, significant ridership, right? Some of our buses like Jane have a huge ridership. And so that's a driver too. So there's the physical conditions of the street. Some places it's just much easier because it's wider. And so you have less of the conflicts in terms of removing parking or things like that, but certainly driven by where ridership is significant. And Jane would be one of those. And if you look at the rest of our priority list, in what they will have in common is very high ridership and probably, uneven performance because of the competing congestion on the street. That's, kind of keeping a lot of people waiting longer than they should be.
And they have to be multiple lanes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jagdeo, do you have a question on this before we leave targeted priority lane painting?
No questions.
Commissioner Osborne?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. Couple of questions. How long does the paint last?
Quite well. So we put in Rapid TO Eglinton in 2020.
Yeah, I think around 2020, through the pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, and I was out there probably just last weekend and it's still looking pretty fresh. So it lasts quite well. It has withstood the winters of Toronto, at least thus now.
Okay, and question, Roger, what education is the city doing so that drivers understand what red paint means? Because certainly as I go around the city, drivers seem to have absolutely no idea what the different road markings mean.
Yeah, so typically, whether it's static signage or actually painting in the lanes itself, where it's stenciled with bus-only lane, so the physical infrastructure itself is the first sort of training, that it's obvious visual cues to a driver that you shouldn't be driving in that particular lane. In addition to that, there are cases where I believe we've got static signs as well too, at beginning access and egress points. In terms of whether or not we've actually recently done any specific sort of educational awareness sort of campaigns, that's something that I don't know if we've necessarily done in the past while. Maybe it's something we could definitely look at though.
Madam Chair, to that, we're in the process of creating some shareables, if you want, that are maybe video-based, that could be used on social media, et cetera, just as a real primer, like what is a Q jump lane? What does red paint mean? And so we're working on developing those that we want to be able to share, that a councillor could share locally, but we could use on all of our platforms and social media platforms to make sure that we're at least doing some work to begin to educate people as to what it actually means. We would hope that the bus only in big block letters would do the trick, but when we experience it, it often doesn't. So there's work to be done there. So we're happy to share some of that content with this committee when it's complete.
Yeah, and there's also something to be said for the consistency with the approach and methodology that we take, that we're consistent with all surrounding municipalities and within Southern Ontario, well, within the province of Ontario. So you drive into York Region, it's exactly the same measures and metrics that are put in place. So therefore, motorists, regardless of where they're coming from, even if they're from outside the city, are already gaining that sort of familiarity of this, and it's not something foreign to them when they come into the city boundaries.
Right. Now, you mentioned early on the need to partner with business improvement associations and the residents associations. So what are you doing in terms of outreach to Tabia, to Fontra, to Fostra, to get this information out to as many people as possible?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So typically, I think the approach that has been used is we have a really robust community outreach program, and usually it's tied to a specific, kind of construction project, improvement intervention. And so one of the things we want to do is flip that a little bit. So it's not us always talking to somebody in a moment of stress or distress because there's change coming. And so part of my note earlier about some of the content we're developing is so we can go out proactively. So it's not like hey, BIA on Dundas, you're losing parking. Let's explain it to you now. It's talking to that community in a proactive way, not connected to a specific tension that might be created around a project. So again, I think our team does really good work when much needed investments are coming. I think what we'd like to do is do more of it completely proactively and not tied to, you know, specific project A, B, or C. So as we develop the content we are right now, that's what we'll begin to roll out with them.
And in your content that you're developing, are you focusing on, you know, help you get better transit service?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I think there's a lot of really stubborn misconceptions about what some of these things might do to, especially to business. And so that's an ongoing one. And we saw that, you know, King Street was a great example of that. And so part of what we are trying to do, and we'll keep to endeavor to do, is to tell a story about what the benefits to them would be and the community at large. And these are not punitive measures. These are investments that will in fact help the businesses plus the surrounding community. So I think there's work to be done there, because it is the posture initially is almost always the opposite of that. And so there's work to be done there.
Do you meet regularly with John Kiru and the Tabia team?
In my group, I don't. I'd have to ask our community outreach team if they do that. So I just would have to take that away.
Okay, well, please let us know, because if no one is speaking to him regularly about these issues, may I suggest that you consider doing so?
Happy to.
Tabia is the Toronto Association of Business Improvement Associations. And there's more of them in my ward than anywhere else. Okay, next slide, please.
All right, and so this is the last major tool in our toolbox for improving transit operations, and that's looking at regulatory changes. And so regulatory changes might mean looking at parking restrictions, turning restrictions, or how lanes are utilized in the city, and seeing if there's an opportunity to rationalize it or modernize it to help improve the flow of transit. And so recent examples of this are on some downtown corridors where we looked at the parking restrictions that were in place. And when we had construction projects that were impacting the streetcar service, you know, were there opportunities to look at those parking restrictions to change them so that we can have better free flow of the bus replacement services for those streetcar routes. And so we implemented that on Dundas, on Queen, and on Spadina. And then two other ones that we're working on right now are on Dundas West and on Donlands. And that's the last slide.
Okay, before you leave that slide, commissioners, questions on this slide? Commissioner Jagdeo, any questions?
No.
Commissioner Osborne?
I have not on this specific slide, but on the group of them.
Okay, we'll go back to general questions. I just should have started at the beginning with slide by slide questions, because it's too big and too important and too detailed a presentation to sort of do in lumps. Commissioner Kim? All right. So again, I'm looking for data here. And I know I've raised this many times. Where are the places where you most need parking changes? And again, since I joined this board, I have asked for that several times. I've never got a list. You know, I took the initiative to deal with Dundas Street because it was mentioned in passing in a presentation. We never get a list. Where are the places where parking, legal parking, illegal parking, turning are causing significant delays of service transit? And so, again, you can't ask us to take action on things if you don't tell us where the problems are and show us the data.
Yeah.
When will we get data about where the problems are and how big those problems are, what the priorities are, and what changes you need?
So we'll provide that data, and we'll kind of measure it in a few ways. Obviously by as Eric mentioned earlier, by the performance of the route is like a key measurement. So if it's slowed significantly, I think the other overlay we'd want to put on that is the ridership, right? So how many people are being slowed significantly? In a very general sense, and we will provide this data for you, but safe to say that our east-west streetcar routes in this city, that almost every instance have street parking along the entirety of their corridor is a problem. We recognize it's a lot easier for the TTCs to say than the city because of maybe different audiences, but we can say with confidence that on Queen, Dundas, College, at the very least, that's a significant challenge for the effective performance of those streetcars. And
Are there
corridors.
particular locations
Yes.
or?
Yeah, so we will provide that, but I have to say, just to couch it all, that parking in general on those corridors does slow the performance of the streetcars, regardless of where it is. We have an ability to pinpoint that around intersections and other things where there's other kind of infrastructure and maybe design features that make it more acute. And so we'll certainly provide that for you.
But you know that the city staff are a year into a massive parking report. And if you don't give them data about specific conflicts with parking, that's not going to get incorporated in that report.
We're happy to do that. I think it will probably be challenging data for the city, but we're happy to provide that.
Okay, but you haven't done it yet.
Not
And
to my knowledge.
They're,
but I
they're sort
can't
of
say that for-
well into the
I
process.
can't say that for certain, so I'll check on that.
All right.
It may be happening, but I can't at this moment say for certain. If it's not, we will certainly do that.
All right. Well, Roger can help you make sure that that data, it goes to NAS, I think.
Yeah, Naz Capano, yeah, correct.
But yeah, we need to know, we need to make clear choices based on data. And if we don't have data, we can't make the decisions. I know I've said that about 6 times this morning, but it's the same issue that keeps coming up is we're going to be making a big decision about parking. And if you're not speaking up for the needs of the TTC, it probably won't get what you need.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
Please hurry. You can check with NAS as to what the timeframe is,
Sure.
but I think they're well advanced.
Sure.
And if they're going to do any consultation on parking adjustments, they've got to get at it if they're going to have a report to us in Q1. What do you mean by lane rationalizations?
Let's think of an example.
I know what parking restrictions are and turning restrictions.
So actually, the third bullet's about, we're looking at Donlands as one of our examples. So at Donlands and O'Connor, on the east side, there's angled parking. It's kind of unique. You don't see angled parking too much in the city.
Right.
There's angled parking on the northbound lane. And because of how the angled parking works, the lane next to it is narrower. Because I think when we had that arrangement, cars back in the day were shorter than they are now. And
That's
the way
true.
that the cars protrude out, it makes that lane next to it tighter.
Okay, but again, has that specific detail about the length of the cars and the impact on the transit been provided to the people doing the parking review?
Not this example, not that I know of.
Okay, may I suggest that you talk to Naz Capano and give him data, specific locations, examples of what you need and what the problems are?
Yeah, we will do that.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go back to the beginning. Sorry.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, Chris, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's from something that you mentioned that I'm just interested if we could have, just for context, when you are reporting this, and I'm assuming you have this, hoping you have it, if we could have an inclusion of what we're talking about in terms of the number of parking spaces. So what's the trade-off here? We're looking at, X improvement on a streetcar route in exchange for 100 parking spots or 30 parking spots, just so that we have some idea of what we're looking at the exchanging here.
I agree. And where? Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is again where the coordination with the BIAs is so important. Okay, well, I think
Thank you.
we're now ready to take questions overall, because I know we asked a lot of questions going through, but there probably are still more. Commissioner Jagdeo, do you have any overall questions you didn't get to ask yet?
I think it's more of a reiteration of sort of your line of questioning, Chair, around, look, I think we want to be helpful as a board, and the more data that we can get, the more information that we can understand where the challenges are, the better that we can be helpful. So I suppose my question to you, Josh, and to team, and fantastic report, and thanks for sharing this, is, well, what can we expect over the next several months on, will you put together or help us put together a list of here are the major issues, here's where we believe you can be helpful to us, here's what a potential action item looks like. I'm cognizant that we're we're taking this as information, but would love to at least reiterate the fact that we are looking for ways to be useful. And if there are any ways that you can put together some recommendations, that would be terrific.
Yeah, thanks for that, Commissioner. So above and beyond some of the touch points with the city to make sure it's going through their vehicles, no pun intended, to be put in front of council and those decision makers for the congestion management plan. I think what we do have, and we largely have it already, it's just more of, I would say, telling the story with the data. And so tying what you've seen today with the data we have on, performance of queue jump lanes, priorities of them, where they might be like physically located throughout the city. So I think what we would anticipate as next steps, I don't know where or like what meeting that would happen at. We would marry that data we have to the context we've already given you. So we'll bring that together. And so that would include, to Commissioner Osborne's point, what are the gains? What are the costs? And then on top of that, how would we, I don't want to use the word rank, but how would we prioritize where we get the most bang for our buck?
Well, that's what we certainly want to know, for sure.
Perfect.
Chrisanne, when is our next ARMC meeting, please?
The next scheduled meeting is November 21st.
Okay, can you have a good review for us at that meeting? Okay, that was a yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. That would be very helpful. Okay, Commissioner Jagdeo, any other questions? Commissioner Osborne?
Yeah, I'm interested to know for these proposed changes, and maybe I would direct this also to the city. Do we have, before we start doing this, an understanding of what success looks like?
So,
in other words, sorry,
so metrics.
Yeah, like if we say we need to save 5 minutes on this, by painting out a bus route, and it does not happen, that we can say, this was not a good use of a lane of traffic, we return it to cars and parking. Or we've hit it, and therefore we've done a good job. So I'm just wondering, so that we can be honest with ourselves about some of these changes that are happening with the use of very scarce road space around the city, that we're doing the right thing for everybody, and that we can in fact be honest with ourselves when we don't succeed, and also honest when we do, that we've got a way of saying that yes, we had an objective and we have met this objective.
Yeah, so if I can field that one. So yeah, every time we do these sorts of improvements, we always establish some sort of a baseline criteria, like what are we trying to achieve goals? Like if I can give a specific example, earlier in the slide deck, Josh made reference to the work that we did on King Street, whereby with respect to that, we were looking at when we first implemented the King Street priority corridor, what were the end-to-end travel times like? And we consistently monitor those end-to-end travel times from the time we implemented it right through. And again, we saw late last year, because of the Adelaide construction, because of a number of other construction initiatives that were ongoing, that baseline was well exceeded. We're now seeing, like almost double, triple the amount of end-to-end travel time runs than what we were seeing before when we first implemented the system. We then implemented a number of signal timing changes. We did some modifications to some of the traffic lights. We added the traffic agents on the route. And in doing so, we were able to see this reduction. And as we said in the slide there, we saw this huge reduction in terms of end-to-end travel time runs that essentially brought us back to where we started as that kind of baseline. So again, that's one example, but we try to do that with every single implementation that we do, where we establish a bit of a baseline. Sometimes the baseline is going back to sort of free flow traffic conditions. So again, obviously, we're not looking to get ourselves back down to there. But again, it's all relative to kind of say, with that investment, what did it get us, kind of thing, right? So we do try to do that wherever possible.
Sorry, that is a retroactive assessment, and I'm interested in knowing if you have, like when you build a bike lane, for example, in the city of Toronto, do we say that we need to have 2,000 cyclists an hour, a week, a day, for this to be considered a good use of that road real estate? Likewise, when we paint a bus lane red, so Jane Street, what kind of, going in before we pull out the paint. What kind of travel improvements do we need for this to be considered a good idea? And then when we have it, we say, yeah, we have in fact met these objectives. We are getting good use out of this scarce resource. Or honestly, then we can say in good faith to any concerned citizens that we're prepared if we're not meeting our objectives to revert to what we had before.
Yeah, oftentimes when it comes to the infrastructure that's going in, the logic is much more about providing the alternative and providing safe, reliable alternatives to people. So for example, you gave the suggestion about with the bike lanes, obviously cyclists and mixed traffic from a Vision Zero safety perspective is something that's not desired. And so from a safety perspective, we're looking to introduce that infrastructure, and we're not benchmarking and saying, well, if we don't have 2,000 riders, well, it's not a success per se, right? When it comes to things like the queue jump lanes, though, as I give that example, that is something where there's a little bit more of a clear opportunity to kind of say what sort of benefit return we see. And again, establishing that baseline and then doing the relative comparison against it to say, this is how much money it costs to implement that. This is what the trade-off is, if there is a trade-off to traffic. Sometimes there's no trade-off to traffic. And again, going back to the example of Spadina, where we added in that dedicated bus lane from Richmond down to Front Street of Queens Quay. In doing so, we actually eliminated a pinch point for cars. So there was more of a laminar flow of vehicles by taking away that third lane, rather than having people trying to jockey in and out. And statistically, I would argue that there was no impact to cars by taking that lane away, but the data actually suggests that there was a 1 minute reduction in travel time, which again is not surprising because we're eliminating a pinch point. We're eliminating that whole operation of cars trying to jockey in and out of the space.
Okay, so we've gotten a little off the mark here, just from I appreciate what you're saying. Sorry, I don't mean to dismiss it. But I would like to see, before we start doing these things, some idea of where we'd like to go with it, not just, in a way, just totally to keep ourselves honest. I have no objection to any of these measures. In fact, I am fervently in favor of them. I just want to make sure that we know where we want to go with it. That's it.
Right. Commissioner Osborne, I'm going to cut you off because we're past 5 minutes. But if you need a second round, we can do it. Commissioner Kim?
Thank you.
We're still at questions. We'll do comments last. Any questions? So I had a related question about the metrics and success. I mean, you talked about Spadina, you talked about King Street, but another change that we made recently because of the Spadina shutdown was to restrict parking and turning in Chinatown on Dundas Street. And what I understood was that the timing improvement was like a minute. So I do think that Commissioner Osborne has an excellent point that you ought to, it's reasonable for us to ask you, is it worth the disruption to Chinatown for you to save a minute? What is a reasonable metric, given that there are real losses when we take away street space? So when you come back to us in November, please propose metrics. It's not the same as bike lanes, which are primarily a network effect question. But for these particular questions where you're saying we need to reduce parking and restrict turning in order for the TTC to be on time, if it doesn't make any material difference to being on time, then why are we doing it? So I want to echo Commissioner Osborne's request that you propose some criteria for us.
That was just, if it was a question, we could chime in a bit on that.
Yes, go ahead.
When we put in service changes, for example, we always strive for maximizing customer benefits. And the goal for any change, whether it's putting in parking restrictions or left turn changes, is to have more people benefit than people that might be inconvenienced by the change. And so if we get rid of parking on Dundas and 180,000 people are now saving 2 minutes, and you multiply that together versus the 1,000 cars that might have like a 2 minute longer travel time, on balance from the TTC's perspective is that meets our criteria of having more people benefit than people that might be inconvenienced.
Okay, so Commissioner Osborne is asking you propose a methodology for evaluating this, so we're not just going on gut feel. And that's something you'll give us in November?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, sorry, if, Madam Chair, if I can just add to that, that we, just in the example that you gave, it's really useful to know that we're talking about 180,000 people and 1,000 parking spots. Just, it gives us a more fulsome picture of what the puts and takes are.
You and council. Yeah, for sure. Josie, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention as well, and you'll be seeing this in our operating budget submission for 25, but clearly there's a cost of congestion on our service. And so while there are these other metrics that will be determined or defined to determine kind of the value of the impact, I just wanted the committee to understand that congestion is also costing us through our service budget so we can maintain the reliability. So there is a budget pressure that will be coming as a result of that.
Don't worry, Josh was very clear on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff before we have speakers? Okay, speakers. Commissioner Jagdeo, do you want to speak to this? No. Commissioner Osborne?
Sure. I would just like to have the situation with transit almost in a way looked at through the same lens as you mentioned. Cycling is a network, and we don't totally care, if people are using it or not, and it's a safety thing. So
that's not exactly what I said, but okay.
Okay, sorry, I don't mean to misquote here, but you talked about it being a network. That is also what we have, and I would love to see a universe where the transit system doesn't have to fight so hard against parking, for example, on arteries. That we can find a way to elevate the need for a strong, efficient network of transit in this system to a place where it's got its head above the crowd in a way of all these competing priorities that the city has. Anyway, that's just a bit of wishful thinking, but transit is a service to the entire city, and I would love to see some measures taken where we can start to address some of these issues, because in particular, the surface challenges impact such a massive percent of our ridership, and it's not getting any better most of the time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kim?
I just wanted to piggyback on what Commissioner Osborne had said and what you had said, Chair Sachs, about education. So to, first of all, it was education. Like, are we educating the public on some of the good stuff that has happened? Marrying that with what Commissioner Osborne said about the cost benefit of if we took out parking, for example, because putting myself in the shoes, like I'm a transit user, but I'm also a driver. And looking at, in having heard these proposals, if I put my driver hat on, and I think drivers will feel like they're being beaten on. First the bike lanes, and now dedicated bus lanes. And so when you educate the public about what you are doing, whether it's the city or whether it's the TTC, whether it's through an ad campaign or through the BIAs, that the messaging has to be, I think, directed to the drivers as well, to tell them what the benefit is, so that it's not being done to them and saying and slapping it onto them, but saying, here are the benefits and this is why we're doing it. Because putting on my driver hat, it does feel like the driver is going to be quite upset about it. And it's probably heresy at a TTC meeting, so my apologies.
We don't object to heresy. Okay, well, I want to start by saying thank you to Roger, to Josh, to Eric for accepting our invitation to put this report together and come here. Certainly, we're very interested at the Audit and Risk Management Committee of looking at the major risks to good service by the TTC and putting our shoulder to the wheel to help address them. So fair evasion and the obstacles to surface transit were two of the, and maintenance were three of the really big, obvious obstacles that we're talking about today. And I think it's been very helpful to the committee and will be very helpful to the board that you've put this together and that you're going to come back with a more data-heavy, like we want to make evidence-based decisions and not just gut feel decisions. And that you're going to have to help us do that, both here and at council, by giving us the data and showing us the problems and showing that the solutions work and at what cost. So you've heard lots of requests for, this was a great start. We're very grateful for it. We want a lot more because of the importance of the issue and that you can't solve it without good communication in the public, good cooperation with the BIAs and resident associations, and better interaction with council and the city than has been happening up until now. So we want to see that improved. We want to see better results. And this was a great first step. I think we're going to want to keep hearing, I think we're going to start having some standing items on progress on both fair evasion and surface transit obstruction because they are so important, and we think maybe we can be of some help making the move. And if there are other large systemic issues from the corporate plan, the strategic plan, that we should be giving the same kind of attention to, we hope that you will suggest them, or other than we'll keep thinking them up. So thank you very much. I find my note here. All right. I am going to, it says call the vote, all in favor, but where's the recommendation? I'm sorry? We don't want to just receive it.
It's an information
All right, well, apparently we're just receiving it, but we're putting it back on the agenda for the next meeting. So there you go. All in favor of receiving it and putting it back on the agenda for the next meeting? Okay, Commissioner Osborne?
Yes, approved, sorry.
Thank you, because we can't see you. All right. So that's it for that. We don't need the confidential session because we've already dealt with item 3. Oh, that's right, you had a question. Okay, so we now have to go into confidential session, and that going to give us 3 minutes for a bio break, which is great. So I will now read the resolution to recess into confidential session. Can I have the clerk please post the resolution, which is that we require an in-camera discussion of item 3. We'll now be moving into closed session. I'd ask that any TTC staff not identified as participants and members of the public joining in person today kindly leave the room, much as we value your participation. And we'll return to the public session live broadcast at the end of this session, and thank you very much.
Chair Sachs, I'm unfortunately having issues sharing, but I'll read the motion out.
Didn't I just read it?
No.
Okay, I'm supposed to read it, but I don't have it.
No.
Okay, go ahead, please read
So
it.
the motion that you've moved is that the Audit and Risk Management Committee recess into confidential session to consider information related to the security of the property of the city or local board, and that's item 3, Audit Risk and Compliance Audit Plan Status Update.
Super, that was my motion. All in favor? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Eddie, did you have members of the public come to fill up the train so you'd have lots of people to evacuate?
Yes, we did. So Mark had organized. Oh,
We're just chatting while it gets organized. Yes, it's okay.
So it was, to be honest with you, a lot of them were that we brought on, but there was also, we did go to different to have yeah. Years ago.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for the questions. I have a couple of public questions. I'm starting with, I'd like to have an update, please, on the progress of implementing the Auditor General's recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So for the bus maintenance, I'll just give everybody just a recap. So we've had 2 audits from the Auditor General. There was in total 39 recommendations, and 6 of them are still outstanding.
Yes?
One from the first audit, which was on revenue fleet, and then the second is 5 recommendations on the non-revenue fleet. The first one was to do with standard repair times. We've implemented a system, and the Auditor General came back after her last inspection and asked us additional questions. At the time when she asked us for the additional questions, we didn't have the information for her. So we have it now. We're going to review it with her. We did meet with the Auditor General last week on some of this stuff. And we do have a briefing note for you. It didn't make the briefing note package last Friday, but you'll receive it this week. And then on the second audit, which is the 5 remaining for non-revenue, that's more to do with the control of the non-revenue vehicles, the utilization of the non-revenue vehicles, and balancing it with maintenance requirements. And again, we've discussed our status with the Auditor General, and we will continue to do that. We'll continue to work with the Auditor General on that. But really what's happening on those particular 5 is it's dependent on technology. We are implementing a new GPS system on all of the non-revenue fleet. That will help us better locate and track the mileage on these vehicles. And it will help us escalate any issues where vehicles are underutilized and potentially now share them across the different user groups. And it also allow us to find the vehicles. If it's not within the maintenance targets, we can actually escalate to go retrieve them and bring it in closer to what our maintenance intervals should be. So that's what we're doing on that. The installation of the GPS system will be completed by the end of this year. And then after that, we have to go through the process of collecting that data and making sure that the processes that we're putting in place for escalating these things is kosher. And then basically from there, we will review that with the Auditor General again and make sure that we're working in the direction that they see that we find efficiencies there.
Right, did I understand the GPS is being installed on all non-revenue vehicles?
Correct.
By the end of year?
Correct.
Is there already GPS on the revenue vehicles?
The revenue vehicles are tracked through the vision system.
Okay. Will this GPS help you keep the non-revenue vehicles out of bike lanes and other places they do not belong?
No, that's not part of the function there. We through the Innovation and Sustainability Group, we are investigating technologies for turn warning systems and anti-collision systems there. So that would be similar to your car. Many cars have it now. If you go over the line, there's a little beep. It reminds you that you're too close to the lane next to you. So we are going to be piloting some of that technology on the buses. But this particular GPS, no, it doesn't have that feature.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions about the progress in implementing the Auditor General recommendations?
So just to be clear, the technology is being implemented this year, and then there's a sort of a 1-year gathering of data. So hopefully we can close off this recommendation in 2025, but we will be working closely with the Auditor General, make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, and Verge internal audits playing a role in making sure these are done?
Correct. So we have been working with Rich and his team, and so we were part of the discussion with the Auditor General as well. And we are reviewing other elements that are outside of that as well as part of process.
Okay, and is she satisfied with the progress being made?
We didn't explicitly talk to her about the progress being made per se. We are meeting with her. I've got another meeting with her to actually go through this process that we've kind of recommended, because our process is going to entail a higher level of involvement from the AG, because it's more a facilitated discussion. So it's going to have certain resource and implications on their side as well. So I want to have that discussion before firming it up. We haven't explicitly asked about her progress on things, but we're pushing and we're moving.
All right. When do you think you'll have caught up so the TTC won't be behind the rest of the city in terms of implementing her recommendations?
So we'll have to, the short answer is, as it stands right now, management is shooting for 40% of the outstanding recommendations to be done by end of Q4 and up to 90 by Q5, by Q4 of 2025. But that comes with a certain amount of caveats, Commissioner, because when we go in and we look at it, there are some changes and it'll tweak. So what I can commit to this committee right now is that we will bring a dashboard in Q1, that'll show you that progress as we carry on, right? Because there's a little one too many nuances in the process, so we'll show you that progress.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions arising from that? All right, and could we have an update, please, on the fare evasion work that we discussed last meeting?
Happy to provide that. For some context, there's a report coming to the September board meeting that will have obviously a much more comprehensive update on a variety of the motions that have been moved in the last little while and give some progress on that. I'll provide some just highlights in advance of that, and I won't reveal everything that's coming in the board report. One thing that is I note is our enforcement numbers are up significantly in August. And that would include, and I just have them here in front of me, so bear with me, that would include inspections, cautions, and actually tickets issued. So those numbers we can include in that, but just I'll pretend I'm not sharing it now. We have actually issued 679 in the period. That would be in August, so.
Tickets?
Yeah.
679, you said?
So that would be up dramatically, and sorry, I don't have the July dates. That might be coming in as we speak, and I'll provide that with you. Obviously, it's budget time here around the TTC, so we are developing our budget submission that kind of reflects the direction that we've been given by this committee and the board in terms of some of the focus on investing in more fare inspectors and other elements to address the fare evasion. Our CFO, in conjunction with my team and others, are working on developing a target so that we can put a dollar figure next to that so that there can be that kind of data point to offset what our ask might be in the budget. A couple interventions that we've recently conducted, we put together a back to school, we're going to call it an education program. We targeted stations next to high schools where we know from our fare inspectors and from our data counts where there's quite a bit of fare evasion, either through free entry gates or crash gates or through busways. They were, I would say, both incredibly successful and eye-opening in terms of the sheer volume of students who think that transit is free. And so I think it's a good case in terms of there's work to be done, but interventions that can be made that will be helpful. So in those cases, in each of the 4 schools or stations, we redirected hundreds of students to fare gates. And so we're developing that as a bit of a business case and a case study that we'll bring before this committee or the board so we can suggest that it expands elsewhere. In August, there were, and I'm just getting the stats in right now as we speak, over 100,000 inspections, which is about 3,500 a day. It was a little lower in August because we had a really successful deployment at the Canadian National Exhibition. To the credit of Andrea Valente, who's our new head in that area of revenue protection, she identified that at the X, the pattern has been that, well, there are no fare gates there at all. So everyone is expected to pay on vehicle when they board the streetcars. And that was resulting in...
Nobody paying.
Yeah. So a really impactful intervention there where, again, lots of people paid, which was great because we had handheld devices where people could tap direct into the Presto machines, but also reinforcing how entrenched some of the behavior is, where I think most people were shocked to be, kind of intervened and shocked that there was a point where you had to pay for transit. Similar kind of learnings at the school sites, at the stations by schools. So interesting to know as we're going to have a conversation with the MTA soon. They had put out an RFP over the summer for up to $1 million spent on behavioral analysis. Because I think what they're finding is that as much as they enforce, as much as they harden entrances, that there's a behavioral element to this that needs to be addressed. And so hopefully we can learn something from them without spending $1 million. And then my last just update is that I'm just getting the numbers in here. We actually issued 1,900 tickets in August.
1,900.
1,920, and then 445 cautions.
Sorry, 1,900 tickets.
Yeah.
445 cautions?
Yes.
Okay. So why would someone get a caution and not a ticket if they're fare evading?
So there are instances where, and we do want our fare inspectors to have, a bit of a, be able to use some discretion. And so there's some instances where they're going to use discretion. If someone, it appears, has honestly doesn't know how to pay for a ticket, say on the Queen's Quays streetcar where we have a lot of tourists, things like that. So sometimes those are cautions. The other caution has been at the bus bays. So in terms of our back to school, we did not just decide that on day one back to school, we're going to be hammering with tickets. And so there was a lot of redirects, like you can't actually enter here. Please go around the other way. And so I think our caution numbers, at least in August, would be higher because of those 4 locations. And that was every day for a week. So I think that's probably why our cautions are higher. The tickets, I think, are just like our overall effort around the system.
Right. Are you still finding that 50% of the people stopped just walk away and don't pay?
So we certainly have, that is a serious issue where they ignore or walk away from our fare inspectors. And so typically what you might see in that instance is on a streetcar, fare inspector asks to see someone's proof of payment. They will not look up. They will not acknowledge. And so that interaction kind of starts to become more common. Others just walk away. They leave the streetcar, or sometimes don't walk away. They run or scurry away. But yeah, we are definitely seeing that still.
And is it still 50%?
I don't know if the number's 50%. I can get that for you, but didn't know I'd be updating today.
Yeah, well, that's fair. So will you be updating us at the board meeting?
Yeah, so as part of we have the September update is much more comprehensive.
Yes.
So we can provide that there too.
Okay, and what you're going to do about it?
Yeah, and so the other thing I didn't mention, I'm sorry, in terms of that, because the board has already given direction in several areas. One of the things we've begun to do, and it got a little bit of media pickup, was that we've begun the process of closing the free entry gates or the crash gates. Since we've started with 4 stations, just so that our staff can learn how it works and we can see if there's any kinks to work out. Our plan is that we will have more closed by the time we come to the board on September 24th. Some other tactical items we are going to implement. We're always a bit torn in terms of what we want to broadcast because of course, we want to show that we're taking action. I don't know if we want to give like the cheat sheet to how to evade fares in Toronto. So some of the things we do might be things we share in camera just to make sure that we aren't broadcasting or telegraphing.
Right, but have you, for example, shared on social media, you did 100,000 inspections in August and 1,900 tickets and 445 cautions. I mean, that sounds like important information.
Yeah.
What's your plan for communicating it?
So that would be communicated, obviously, we're 2 things. One is that we have a report coming to the board, so we want to come to you and update you first. And as we were talking kind of just in between sessions or items here, the ultimate goal here is to have I'm going to call it a dashboard where, of course, it would come to a committee or a board, but there's a tool that is easy to understand and communicate that exists in between and beyond board meetings. And so that obviously there are some numbers that won't update that regularly, but something like inspections or tickets, that is something that we have monthly. So the intent is to create that dashboard, and that's in the process of developing it. That won't be at the September meeting, but we're pulling that together so that we would have some kind of formal but almost routine reporting mechanism that could be shared with the board or the public.
Do you have an estimate as to when we might see that?
I'm going to get back to you on that because I don't want to get any virtual or literal kicks under the table. But I will get that for you. And that will be part of September.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions about the fare evasion update?
No questions, just good luck, good work.
Thank you. Commissioner Kim.
So when you issue tickets, it's a monetary,
Yep.
right? What's the success rate in them? Like if they walk away from fare inspection officers, and by the way, I've noticed that there's a lot more of them.
Yeah.
And then they issue the ticket. the tickets are issued, like, do people take it seriously?
So someone has to stay to receive the ticket we issue. So that's, I think, part of Chair Sachs's questions in terms of that success rate. If someone walks away, we don't.
Yeah, but what I meant was, you know,
Payments?
if they know that their inspectors don't have a lot of authority and that some people are just willing to walk away, for those that do stay and get the tickets,
Yeah.
is there yet another level of where they don't take this seriously and they don't pay the ticket? And what are the consequences if they don't pay it?
So we don't collect the fine, right? That's becomes a provincial offense, so that through that process. And so, Michael, I don't know if we know what the rate of payment is at that point. He's looking it up right now, so bear with us.
And so the payment doesn't come to the TTC?
No, it does not.
Well, that's under discussion.
Okay.
Currently, it does not. And that's a good point by the chair. We are looking at exploring a different model where that could. But yeah, it is a significant challenge that if someone wants to, run away from a fare inspector, there's not a lot we can do. Where we have much higher success is when it's in station, out in the wild, so to speak, on the street and streetcars. That's where we see more prevalence of people who might disregard and walk away. And in fairness, sometimes they're quite hostile to our fare inspectors. And so we have a lot of instances of that too. And that's when, obviously we don't want to put a fare inspector in a dangerous situation. But I would say, talking to our fare inspectors, we have quite, it's sad, but quite a high frequency of a hostile reaction from people riding the system. The other thing I've described to the chair of this committee and others is, and I think anyone who rides the system sees it, the presence of a fare inspector conveniently has a lot of people exit the vehicle, and then a lot of other people tap when they see that inspector. So not ideal. It's triggering some compliance, but the person maybe who has not paid, they don't even get to the point where there's an interaction, because especially with 4 doors on a streetcar, even if we put 4 people on at each door at a time, someone could always sneak off. So we do see that too. So at some points, there's not even an opportunity to issue that ticket. We assume they're fare evaders. We don't know for certain. Maybe conveniently that was their stop when the fare inspectors got on, but hard to say in that instance. So it is a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Just following up on Commissioner Kim's question, I know I asked you this before. When are you going to make a proposal for what you're going to do about the hostile and recalcitrant patrons?
So it won't be in September. I think that will come later in the year. So one of the things we're looking at is, at one point there was, fare inspectors we did have a plain clothes detachment. And so,
as recommended by the Auditor General.
Yep, so that's one thing that we want to bring to the board. The challenge with the recalcitrant fare evader is we want to keep running service. So the challenge we are presented with is we don't want a streetcar stopped on King because there's a confrontation in the back of a streetcar or on the road or in the entry. And so we always have to balance that. So we won't have a perfect answer, but it's something we're working on to be able to bring to you about what other tools we might have. One of the key sources of information on that front is actually talking to our inspectors, and you're getting that feedback from them. They are the ones who are experiencing this. And so part of the plan is to reach out to them to see what they are doing. As we look out to other jurisdictions, in many jurisdictions, at that point, the direction given to their fare inspectors is to not escalate. The other issue that we have to look at is that we have special constables and we have fare inspectors here. In other jurisdictions, that is a combined role. And so we have to recognize that in a place like Vancouver, where they have special constables who have fare inspection and enforcement capabilities, they also have other tools to theory detain. Again, that's another discussion, whether we want to be detaining people for fare evasion or not. But these are some of the things we'd be pulling together to bring towards for a conversation.
Right. So when should we expect a report from you on that question. A lot of questions have been asked about whether the Division of Fair Inspection and Enforcement was wise. So when are we going to hear from you with your recommendations?
So we will report, as I said, in 2 weeks on on some of the motions that were time-stamped and dated to come back in that quarter. With that, we can also then give you a better sense of when we would circle back on some of these other issues.
Super. All right. Any other questions from any of my colleagues? Commissioner Osmond, I can't see you. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right. Anyone wish to speak to this item? Okay, Commissioner Kim?
I have another question.
Oh, so go ahead.
On the fines.
Sure.
So if the TTC doesn't get the fines, who gets them?
City of Toronto. Under the City of Toronto Act, it's the city that gets the fine amounts.
And they use them to pay for the court services. So it's complicated.
But it may be transferred to the TTC. That's
It's okay, Josie, would you like to talk about this?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, the whole provincial court system around the moving violations was downloaded from the province to the city. So they administer the courts. And as a result, all of that work that happens around the fine collection and implementation of those kind of processes sit with the city. As a result, the funding goes to the city. So that's true for parking tag enforcements that comes from the police officers as well. For example, red light camera, all those items all feed into the court administration. So that was a means of enabling really through the download process to have the funding availability to the city to maintain the court system. So that's kind of where it stands at the moment. We are in conversations to see if there's a different way of thinking about it, including even at the initial point of seeing if we can at least recover the cost of our prosecutors who are spending time on these files. Does that help?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to ask anything or say anything? Anyone on the committee want to ask or anything or say anything on this item? Going once. All right. Okay, I am moving a motion. I am moving a motion that the Audit and Risk Management Committee receive this item 3 report for information, receive the confidential attachment, authorize that the information contained in the confidential attachment remains confidential as it relates to the security of the property of the city or local board. All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Usually somebody wants to do that. Okay, Commissioner Kim is making a motion to adjourn. All in favor? All right, well, thank you very much to everyone. Welcome to our new CEO. We're so excited to have you on board. Thank you to everyone for all the hard work that went into preparing this meeting and the reports. Very helpful. Really good morning, and thanks for the progress.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Bye now.